Okay, so welcome to the Iasa 5 Pillars of IT Architecture talk. I'm Jim Wilt, and I'm currently an IP architect at Microsoft. Before this, I was part of the Iasa team, and I also was part of, for 8 years, a boutique consultancy and strategy called Metrics Reporting. I've got 30 years experience in the industry, and from aerospace to mortgage software to consulting, and I'm a CITA-P certified architect through Iasa. I'm also a Microsoft certified architect. Their program is no longer in existence. CITA-P is pretty much the replacement for it. And I'm going to be discussing the 5 pillars of IT architecture as Iasa has defined them. And it's really a fun discussion because when you see the rigor with which Iasa put this material together, the program together, I think you're going to be impressed that it isn't just thought leadership, someone really smart that just put this out there. This has really got some real meat behind it. So the goals of what we want to discuss today, and in the audience we have Johan, I'm sorry, and Tom, to ask the tough questions. What I want to do is see if we can get through understanding what these 5 pillars are and then help you understand, am I or do I want to be an IT architect? And then the next one is, how do I interact with architects, peer architects or otherwise? And the other one, how can I execute on my own personal growth? And at the very, very end, we've got some growth charts and things like that for you to download and consider. So who is Iasa? Let's just understand who Iasa is. Iasa, by virtue of the animations that hopefully come across through the webinar, is an international organization. It's an architecture organization that's executing throughout the world. I've worked with customers all over the world. I think I've been in 8 countries in the last 2 years working with Iasa. And what's interesting is one of the customers of Iasa, Volvo in Sweden, basically said that they came to Iasa because there are very few international organizations that do architecture, and they really appreciated that we really are focused on it from an international perspective. So the thing is, it started with Paul Price, the Iasa founder, and I believe 10 years ago now is when this began. And I actually knew Paul 10 years ago. He put this whole thing together based on his own experience, and then he brought in industry experts. And Andy Ruth, floating across the screen now, is the MCA founder from Microsoft, and he brought in the expertise of the rigor of the CITA-P exam that we've got. But it's not just these guys. We've got a whole list of distinguished fellows, and we've got a whole bunch of chapters all over the world. And I want to be the first to welcome the resurgence of the Twin Cities chapter and the Utah chapter coming into the fold, because you're among 60,000 members in 50 countries, and that's a pretty big deal. And I think it's really neat when we get some of our United States chapters up and running, because in all honesty, the places I've been, it's a world competitive environment where we really need to be able to compete with the world. And in the United States, we tend to get settled in our ways, and it's really cool when these new chapters come up here in the United States. So let's continue on and talk about how Iasa did its homework. I think it's really cool. This is how the 5 pillars came into being. First thing was to start with a qualitative analysis. We took industry people and focus groups, and I think there were about a dozen focus groups, and they basically said, can you define, these are the smart people, by the way, can you define what architecture is? Give us the elements and the essence and the tenets of architecture. And then what we did is we said, okay, so you guys are calling architecture these 5 things, basically. Let's now take it and do a quantitative analysis. So we take these 5 things and we throw it out to the 7,000 members in a survey. This was of the 50 or 60,000 members, 7,000 were surveyed. And we said, vote on these things as how important they are. And then we took that and we created an asset of as is and to be, meaning based on this survey we can say this is where we are today, but also based on the survey this is where we want to be. It's not just where we are, it's where we want to be, because a lot of companies and architects know where they want to be, they just aren't there yet. And how do we get there? Now, kind of the way you take a look at this, and we take a funnel, and you take our current state, which is our as is, and our future state, And we're going to throw in one element of IEEE 1471. A lot of times when you have a discussion, is it A or is it B, we'll follow IEEE 1471 in terms of a definition and architecture. And that helps us create the ISA IT architecture body of knowledge, which is what ISA is all about. It's a body of knowledge that we want to share with the world and have members build and accentuate over time, because it's growing. It's continually growing. It never stops growing. So the 5 pillars then were defined, and we have business technology strategy, which is the business of IT. We have human dynamics, which is the interaction of architects with others. We have quality attributes, which are the systemic qualities of a solution coming through. And a solution, I mean not a solution architect solution, but a solution in general. We have the IT environment, which is where things all happen, and then we have the design aspects of what we build. And these were the 5 pillars that these focus groups came up with. Now the way they came out on the surveys is kind of interesting. What's very important and what's essential. And they balanced out very, very well. No single pillar is really more important than the others, which means when the focus groups put these 5 pillars together, they did a good job. If it was unbalanced, if IT environment was so much more important than, let's say, quality attributes, then maybe quality attributes would not have been an appropriate choice. But these balanced out, as you can see, well. Tom and Johan, which one speaks out, and does that surprise you? The human dynamics, right? Does that surprise either of you guys? And I don't know.
Well, it's not a surprise in part because I've read some of the documentation, so I cheated. But I mean, human dynamics is crucial to everything we do. So we focus on IT, many of us, but if we don't have the user experience right and the human dynamics right, and you can't do UX without understanding human dynamics. So,
And that was Johan or Tom?
That was Tom.
Okay, Johan, how about you? And maybe he's on mic. What I was going to say for me, it really surprised me a little bit because I was part of when the surveys came back. It kind of surprised me, but then it didn't, because I realized as an architect, where do I spend a lot of my time? It's interacting with people. I'm working up the chain in the C-level management, trying to sell the idea of what it is we're trying to make the business better at, or I'm working on the developer side trying to sell the concept of the architecture we're proposing. And it really is amazing that that's the one. What's really interesting, you'll see in a minute, is what element of human dynamics really came out on top, and I'm not going to blow that away yet. Okay, so let's talk about the skills.
Yes, I mean that's exactly the experience that I've had. Is as an architect, I don't get to legislate what happens. I have to get people to agree with it.
Yes. Now, and this is Tom, right?
Yes.
So Tom, agree with the statement or disagree? Here's the statement: an architect typically manages no employees, yet they manage everybody on the project.
Yeah, I mean that is my experience. I mean, here I am, with a very large 250-plus engineer organization, and only recently do I have 3 people reporting to me.
Yeah, typically we're not having people report to us, but we do have to manage everybody.
Exactly right.
The shareholders, the implementation, the test, the quality assurance. We have to manage the project management. It all comes into play. So on the body of knowledge that we have before us, this is ISA's foundation. And if you take the ISA Foundation Architect Core class, this is what we really focus on, and that's what this talk is primarily about. But there are 4 specializations that ISA supports right now in terms of certification: a software architect, infrastructure, information, and business. Most of our membership is actually in the software and infrastructure. We have several information, and I think we have some business coming through, if not already a few. So that's kind of a new thing. Enterprise architecture is a big deal. Everybody talks about it. Are you TOGAF certified and all these things? We recognize at ISA that enterprise architecture is a role, and ISA, as of right now, does not have a certification for enterprise architecture. And what's interesting is in the people I've worked with all over the world, in research centers, in corporations of manufacturing, and in other areas, most of the people that I was teaching the Architect Core class at were already TOGAF certified. So they're certified in a framework. But the problem they were having, the reason they brought Iasa in, was the execution side. How do I execute against that framework? And this is what's really important to understand. Isa's 5 pillars and skills are around execution of architecture. We don't care which framework, SDLC, or whatever it is you choose to use, we support them all. We back TOGAF and we back SACMA. They're both great. Whatever one works for you, great. We're going to help you execute on those. And that's a big deal, because when you look at what Iasa does, are we in competition with the Open Group? Absolutely not. We really complement each other extremely well. One puts the rigor behind the frameworks. The other one puts the rigor behind the execution. And I think that's a distinct difference that makes them work hand in glove, kind of a relationship. Now, because a lot of the early people that I was showing this presentation to knew about the Microsoft program, and they said, well, Microsoft's got these 7 competencies. How come theirs is different than Iasa? Well, you got to realize, when Microsoft was putting their 7 competencies together, Andy Ruth, he enlisted the help of Paul Price, who ran Iasa at the time. And when Paul's putting the 5 pillars together, he enlists the help of Andy Ruth to put the 7 competencies together. And the reality is they fit perfectly together. And the idea of, if you were to say Microsoft was version 1.0 and Iasa is soundly version 2.0. It's where things have gone to make more sense. 5 pillars is a lot easier to work with than the 7 competencies, so it really makes sense. So our focus is going to stay on that. Question number 1, what is architecture? And to the right here, you've got several definitions of architecture, and they're all pretty good. You know, they date as far back as 1555 all the way up to 2007. And if you were to take the essence of what these are saying and put it on a bumper sticker so that you can just have something you carry around, the Iasa definition would define architecture as the art and science of designing and deliverable valuable technology strategies. And this is an interesting definition, because if you take a look at it, it's not about designing finished solutions, products, or infrastructures. It's about designing a technology strategy. And that really puts an architect in a different sense of what I'm going to say strategic thinking than tactical thinking. There's tactical thinking in what we do without question, but the essence of what we're doing is more around our technology strategies. And then if you take a look at the profession, it's an occupation such as law, medicine, or engineering that requires considerable training and specialized study. And what's not on the slide is it's backed by certification. If I look at law, if I look at medicine, if I look at engineering, they're backed by certification. What does certification do? Certification sets a bar and says, you're executing against the attributes of this profession to this level. And that's what Iasa is also about. So that's architecture. Now what about an architect? If I'm an architect, how does that work with what we just talked about architecture being? Well, 5 different definitions about what an architect might be. Do I do business modeling from an IT perspective? Probably. How quick an iterative process for creating code? Well, that's what our SDLCs are about. What about a person that does advanced engineering and design? Well, I guess I could probably say I do a little bit of that. And in terms of selects a project framework products, yeah, I'm the guy that usually picks what we're going to build on. And then the person that leverages the right services and providers. Yeah, I can say I'm asked to do that. Is it all of these? Probably. We probably are doing an element of all of these things in our architecture. So taking the previous definition, how do I create a bumper sticker definition out of this? And I like this. An IT architect is a technology strategist for the business. I like this definition because it positions us as a thought leader tying technology to meet our business needs. And I know that's the big overused phrase, aligning with business. But if you think about it, we're aligning our technology to the business through a strategic approach, and that kind of fits the definition. So I'm really comfortable with saying, ISA's definitions are something I would aspire to be if I'm not already there. Question is, are you an architect? Well, let's take a look at these 5 pillars and examine whether you would classify yourself as an architect based on these definitions. BTS, Business Technology Strategy. By definition, it's the skills required of an architect to identify, design, and plan and support a technology environment provided on a business to create a basis of competitive advantage for the company. If I look up the word strategy and say, what does strategy mean? It's something to make my company more competitive. So this is really what BTS is about, the Business Technology Strategy. And it's made up of several pieces. There's going to be basic business competence. Do I understand the basic business competence? Well, do you understand what business your business is in? And Tom and John, Johan, I'm sorry, you don't have to share what business you're in, but I'm going to walk through the Meyer example here, and I know Johan probably knows Meyer. I think they have this Meyer in Minnesota. I know they don't have them in Utah. It's a Midwest-based grocery store and department store kind of one. If you take the Walmart Superstore, that's Meyer's design, but Fred Meyer and his father came up with it many, 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 many years ago. They were friends of Sam Walton, and Walton adopted it for the Superstore. The thing is, do you really know what business you're in? And the question often is deceiving, as in this example case study. So Meyer's a grocery store, right? Well, maybe. I mean, if I take a look at it, Fred Meyer here and his father, Hank, they founded it, and they created it back in the 40s, and it started out as a grocery store. But you know what? The guys got kind of rich, and they turned into philanthropists. And one of the things that they're pretty much known for is the arts, sculpting arts. The Leonardo da Vinci horse, when they ran out of money in Italy to build the horse, they came to Fred Meyer in Grand Rapids, Michigan and said, hey, would you be willing to give us some money? He goes, hey, absolutely. How much do you need? Well, we need millions. Absolutely, but here's the one condition. You got to build one for me, too, with original parts. So the horses are 50-50 original and copies in Italy and in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So Meyer's in the business of philanthropy and the arts and promoting the arts. That could be, too. That's one way of looking at it. The reality is Meyer's in real estate. Every Walmart in the nation sits on Meyer-owned property. That's why whenever Sam tried to buy Meyer from Fred Meyer, he couldn't because Fred held the lease on the land that his buildings are on. So just because you think you know what a business is in, do you know really what a business is in? So John in the audience, or Johan in the audience, and Tom, Google what business are they in. Or how about this?
I'd say they're in the business of selling advertisement.
Oh, absolutely right. You got it. Their real competitors aren't Apple and Microsoft. Their real competitors are ABC, NBC, Turner Broadcasting, the New York Times, right? Understanding the business is a big deal for an architect. I know I have a way of making a short story long, but that's the point that I really want you to understand. And then you need to look at how an organization fits into their competitive landscape, and then how does the technology help them do that. Another part of it is the financials. You need to, I'm thinking in the CITA-P exam, you need to be able to talk about TCO, CBA, ROI. Do you know what these are? Total cost of ownership. How much the entire solution costs, not only to build, but to maintain over the lifespan of that solution. Cost-benefit analysis is how I determine which approach maybe I'm going to use. I'll do a CBA against it. Return on investment is typically what we look at in terms of I need a return on my investment or I'm not going to invest in it. And that gets into your payback period. In aerospace, we used a 3-year payback period typically. There's net present value valuations. Today, there are several papers being written on real options valuation to help justify cloud investments because cloud investments don't always come back with an ROI that's understandable. This is part of the BTS aspect of things. It's also about innovation and validation, and how do I communicate innovation. And there are several tools that the business world uses. One is the book here, and it's in the credits at the end. Innovation, the 5 disciplines of getting what customers want, introduces a tool on NABC, the needs, approach, benefits, competitive alternatives. Presentation of a strategy, generally technology agnostic, but you're presenting a strategy for the business. Next, you've got the Norton & Kaplan strategy map, which everybody's familiar with the business scorecard. That came from Norton & Kaplan. You add another column, the picture column in the center here, and that is the strategy map that builds out the strategy. This is great for an efficiency strategy if you're following Miles and Snow's or even the Porter strategy typologies. This is a very good way for showing how to make a more efficient organization. But let's just say I'm Apple. Apple would be using something like a blue ocean strategy that basically creates an uncontested market space for a product that they've got. So you take a look at a lot of the products that Apple has brought to fruition, the iPods and things like that. They brought them against a red ocean of competition of MP3 players, but they presented them in a different format. They created the iTunes network. Now you think about it, iTunes is the big innovation, not the devices, not the iPads, not the iPhones, not the, I mean, they are cool. I've got one. I'm using one right now. They're really, really cool. But the reality is, it's the iTunes, which would be in an area where they invented something that no one else was doing very well, and they created a blue ocean. And everybody can copy them, and they really don't care. If you ever look at it, is Apple really concerned about Android sales? No, they've got their customer base pretty locked right now. So that's a blue ocean way of looking at it. So BTS, I'm spending more time on this pillar because this is generally where architects in the industry, coming from the IT realms of building great code like I did, are very weak. And I just learned these tools about 12 years ago when my business partners taught me on them, and it changed my life completely. Let's take a look at our industry. Where are we going? If I take a look at cloud or tablets or phones or Google Docs versus Office 365, all these things that are coming into fruition, how do they affect my customers and my own companies? Do I need to be worried about them? Consumerization of IT, do I need to deal with that? Is it really a different problem, or is it the same old problem I had back when I wanted to stop wearing suits every day of the week and wear jeans on Friday? You know, you can bring a lot of comparisons in this to understand a lot of these problems have been solved before. We just have to understand where we solved them. And the thing is, I need to know where trends are going so that I know where I'm going to need to focus my efforts in terms of creating that technology strategy for my business. So let's move on down to the IT environment. We're very familiar with this, right? This is the skills and functions and the procedures and the aspects of technology that an organization is going to use to ascertain a solution. Now, if you think about it, it's how I run things and how I create new things in terms of my IT environment. If I look at application development, what methodology are you using to create consistency of delivery and quality of your applications? I could be using RUP, Rational Unified Process. I could be using a waterfall depicted in there. I could be using Agile, what you see in the bottom, right? That's a form of Agile, or extreme programming. You can do various methodologies and things, but the idea in Iasa is that you have something, you could have invented it yourself, that creates a consistent delivery model for your solutions of application development. That's in the IT environment pillar. And it doesn't mean that one is better than the others. It means that you are effectively using the right ones at the right time. You've got your infrastructure. How am I building out my infrastructure? How am I changing the infrastructure over time to incorporate, for instance, cloud capabilities? Is OpenStack part of my new frameworks that I'm going to be incorporating so that I don't have to worry about who my cloud vendor is? You know, these kinds of things. Technical project management. In the IT world, you may not be the project manager, but you need to know how to interface with one. And the question on the table then is, any ideas on this one, Tom? What does a technical PM want from you as an architect, typically? You know,
well, usually it's say that again?
Oh, I was going to say, take by the science, he doesn't need anything from you. No, what does he need from you?
He wants to know what technology direction I'm going to give to the team that's about to launch off on a project.
Absolutely. He's looking for, are you giving these guys something so new that I've got to extend the schedule? Or are you giving them something they're familiar with where I can go with the previous schedule to know how these guys work? And they're looking for how do you interact on the timeline of things based on what you're throwing at them, what's new, what's reused, and things along those lines. You're absolutely right. And it's important from that perspective that we give them what they need when they need it. And if you're ever asked to do their job and be the architect, I think in my experience I found I do both really poorly. I can't be a very good PM, but I can do a little bit of it. I can be an okay architect, but if you ask me to be both architect and project manager, the project's ruined. I don't know if anybody's ever had that experience, but if you're asked to do both roles, oh, you know, may God have mercy on your soul, as they say. So that's another aspect of it. Choosing the platforms and frameworks, what Tom just said, is a part of your role in the IT environment pillar as an architect. You have to choose platforms and frameworks that are A, appropriate for the solution, and B, implementable by the teams that you're going to have build these things. If you pick the right platform with the wrong team, it's just as bad as picking the wrong platform with the right team. It's not a good mix. And then change management is a huge part of our IT environment, dealing with change and monitoring change and causing any changes to go through a process. This is a very big deal. This is where most money is lost on a project, is inefficient change management. Asset management is looking at all of the artifacts that I created around my portfolio of solutions and what assets do I have that I can reuse in new solutions, because that reusability means that I'm not reinventing it each time. Governance, we've got a governance framework on the right there. The big deal on governance is not to be the person who's holding the team to the task with a strong thumb on the project, but an enabler, if you will. We're doing this to meet either what I'm going to say governmental or industry or internal, what I'm going to say not restrictions but guidances and so forth that allow us to have what I'm going to say adherence so that we're not caught in an audit. I remember doing banking software where governance was very interesting. There was a browser solution where you could actually go back and look at another person's account. It didn't matter that I could fix it with JavaScript. It just mattered that I documented that it was a problem with the browser technology, and that's all I had to do was to document it. So I think an architect has to do what's judicially right beyond what the laws say. I put some JavaScript in there to prevent it from happening as well. So that's just one of those things to think about. So our testing methods, our tools and techniques are also in this pillar. You've got unit testing, regression testing, and the techniques that we're using to create what I'm going to say quality software. One thing about IT environment is you need to be familiar with where the industry is going, who the leaders are, right? Let's just be honest. Who owns identity in the internet today? It's Mark Zuckerberg, right? It's Facebook. I can log on anywhere with a Facebook account these days. Knowing these trends is going to affect us in IT. If we're 5 years away from hiring people and we give them, here's your user ID and password for our environment, and they'll come back to you and say, oh, thank you, I'm not interested in that. I just want to log on with my Facebook ID. Can you work that out for me? You see, these trends are going to really affect business in the future. And it's going to be where they're going to hand you your laptop and you're going to say, no thanks, I got my Android tablet here. I'm just going to use that instead. And you have to deal with it. So that's part of understanding the environment. It's also about our balance. Am I going to build or am I going to buy, right? Am I going to go to Google Docs or am I going to build a document management system myself? You know, waterfall versus agile, you can get very religious about these things. An architect has to keep the religion out of it, the objectivity in it, and the objectivity gets into the human dynamics of knowing how your teams best work. Interoperability versus standalone. If I build something standalone, I have complete freedom to do anything that I want. If it's got to talk to something else, well, that's going to extend the schedule. That's going to extend the schedule a lot in many cases, 5 times depending on what it is. If I'm doing ANSI X.25 communications with a bank, for instance, I can count on a lot more time developing that than if I'm building it for my own utilization internally. So these are things you have to balance out. Quality attributes. This is a fun one because this is the systemic qualities that are cross-cutting across the system entirely. This isn't just one component of the system, it's everything. And I have a religious belief on some of this that I'll share with you in just a moment. Iasa really needed to put this in context, so they put it in 4 groupings. Security gets its own grouping. But if I look at usage, I'm looking at my user experience, localization of the languages that I have to support. How easy is it to access? Can I personalize it or customize it? On the development side, I've got to manage it, maintain it, support it. How extensible and flexible is it? And on the operations side, how is its performance? Am I monitoring its performance? Is it scalable? How available is it? Is it reliable? And this gets into where you can put various qualities as attributes around your solution. But the key is they're cross-cutting, they're systematic, but there are going to be constraints against all of these things, and you have to do trade-offs. And we actually have a matrix, I'll show you in just a second, on these trade-offs. If I were to say one thing about quality attributes, it's going to be the words "as measured by" should be at the end of every quality attribute. I need to have 99.999% uptime as measured by, and I put the measures in, as measured by an independent resource hitting my website every 15 milliseconds, for instance. If you don't have an as measured by, how do you know that you're meeting your attributes? They need to be practical. How many of our customers, and I have a decimal point off, I apologize for that, 999%. If I go 3 nines, that means I'm down 9 hours every year. If I go 4 nines, I'm down 1 hour every year. Okay? If I say 6 nines, it's 31 seconds a year I'm allowed to be down, either planned or non-planned. That's what these mean. There is no such thing as 24/7. It just makes a nice card that you hand out about whatever it is you do. It's very important to be very real about these things. So what you have to do is identify what do you need. My vendor at Metrics Reporting that provided my Exchange and SharePoint online as a complete cloud service gave me 95% reliability, which meant 8 hours a month I could be down. And that was fine for a small boutique. In fact, one time they were down for 16 hours and they gave me the month for free because they held up to their SLAs, their service level agreements. If you're building something, what I usually do is attribute quality attributes to dollars. I can give you 3 nines for, let's just say, $250,000. I can give you 4 nines for, it might work out to be $600,000. If I need 5 nines where I have multiple data centers redundant in 3 different countries, I'm going to need about $15 million. When you put it in those terms, when you're talking to your stakeholders, they often can correct themselves as to what they need for real quality attribute measurements. This is the interactions chart that Stephen Cohen put together. He's one of the architects that's very prominent inside Iasa. And it's really interesting because certain attributes really don't affect each other at all, but some of them help and hurt each other. If I take personalization and customizability, they're going to help each other if I build towards those. But if I tried to build personalization against extensibility, that's going to work against each other. So it's often good to take a look at these quality attributes and determine if I'm accentuating one at the cost of another. Run on down to design. In the design aspect of things, these are the skills that really are focusing on what you would associate an architect to be. These are the diagrams, the charts, the use cases, all of the artifacts that we create to ensure that we have a design that's really going to deliver. Are you guys familiar with like ATAM, the Architect Trade-off Analysis Method, or PBAAM, Perspectives-Based Architecture? These are...
I'm familiar with ATAM for use with our regarding database technology, sure.
Great. Wow. Okay, so Tom is an architect. He's going to answer yes at the end. The key about some of these tools are, just as we would hope that our developers are going through tests and they're going through code reviews, our architectures also need to go through design reviews. And ATAM is a great method for doing a design review. And Louis Curtis, an architect, and George Sorbonne, popular in Iasa, have created the perspectives-based architecture analysis method, PBAAM, and it's available on the Iasa site as well. The thing is about design. Good design is justifications, reasons, and trade-off considerations. It's not pretty pictures. You know, that's what we get associated with, our architectural designs, because we put the pretty pictures on our wall because they're diagrams that really depict our justifications, reasons, and trade-off considerations. And the key is it encompasses the decisions made. One of the real key things about our architectural designs is we can trace back. So I can go to anything in the diagram here. This is something I call an agile all that I did. And I could get, somebody wants to make a change, and I could say, well, we need to go through change management because we made a conscious decision not to do that. And I can point to where we made that decision and talk about why we made that decision. One of the things we had was a taxonomy for a site that was going to capture questions and answers. And the thing I made an argument about was we can only ask 3 questions. If you ask anybody more than 3 questions, and make only one of them required. and if you ask more than that, then they're going to get frustrated and not use the tool. Well, into the middle of the design, a business architect came across and said, well, I want to put a taxonomy. I've got 15 taxonomy fields that need to be filled out. And I went back to the original design and I said, okay, we've got to change our design to accommodate that, and it's going to cost this much more. Always associate money to changes because people react to costs. They don't react to logical discussions. Let's just be honest. As an architect, we all know logic does not rule, money rules. So you have to take it back to the costs. What we ended up doing was keeping the 3 questions, but then we enlisted in a second phase a librarian that would come back and fill in the 15 taxonomy fields outside of the person asking the question, only because it was wise to have those fields, but the thing is you can't ask them at the time that they're in a crisis. And that's a good design concept, if you will, and because we had our justifications and reasons documented, we were able to postpone that to the second phase. It's just an example. So what does design imply? Well, you got to know your methodologies and techniques. You just can't sit down and start designing and just say it's going to, fresh every time. You need to have a consistent way of doing your designs. What tools do you use? I'm real partial, and this is no plug. I like Sparks, the Enterprise Architect tool. Why? I like it because it gives me the traceability to the decisions made. For every element that I put on the diagram, I can put in the text behind it what decision was made and why, and go back to that. I don't know, Tom, do you use anything specific?
No, in this area I'm not as formal as you. I use various tools to document what we've done, but not as you just described, not that one anyway.
Well, I would say, and this is just I'm pulling a number out of the air, but I'm probably not too far off. I'm going to say probably 80% of most architects would use Excel to document their designs, the decisions and things in their designs, because it's just easy to throw it in an Excel spreadsheet. So
combination. It's usually a combination of Excel and Word documents and Visio, and that pretty well gets me down the road.
Got it, Visio. And now we also have something through Iasa, an online, golly, it's escaping me right now. There's an online Visio tool that you can get through Iasa that's really pretty good. So that is kind of a neat thing. In the design, we need to know patterns. Patterns are probably one of the best things an architect can use. As Christopher Alexander put it, he's a real architect, I think from the 20s. I say real, a building architect of the 20s. A pattern is a way of doing the same thing over and over 1,000,000 times without ever doing it the same way twice. And that's really where patterns give us the ability to create repeatability in our solutions. We look for these patterns. All design decision elements and artifacts need to tie to a business requirement. That's a big deal. Our business requirements need as measured bys on them, and then our design decisions need to go back to that business requirement that it affects. This traceability, the rigor in this traceability comes into play not so much in the design and implementation phase. It comes when the wrenches are thrown into the works. So here I am, an architect, I designed a solution, I'm working with the stakeholders, right? And all of a sudden, we're into implementation 6 months, and one of the stakeholders comes back and says, well, I need this capability that doesn't exist. And I need it for a show we're going to show at in 4 weeks. and the wrong answer is absolutely be happy to accommodate that. The right answer is great. Let's look at the trade-offs of what that's going to cost us, because obviously something's going to have to give if we put that in. But if you need it, it's real. Let's go back to our decisions and our design and identify if we discounted it or if we just didn't think of it. If we didn't think of it, we'll incorporate it, but we go through change management. And there's a cost associated with that change. And you're very business-like. The BTS now comes into play through the design phase. They all really work together. The book Whole Systems Design is a great book, and I equate it to how the body works. If I work on the heart alone and not the lungs and not the pancreas and not the digestive system and not the blood circulatory system, I can't build a good system by just fixing the heart or any of the other individual pieces. They all work together. Your blood sugar is affected by everything as well. It all works together as a whole system. And a lot of times we're designing solutions as an application architect, not a software architect, as an application architect around a specific component. I'm doing the integration component, so I'm architecting the best integration method using WebSphere. Okay? Well, great, but how does that interact with the whole system? And I've built systems myself where I focused on the one piece and realized I built it so good it disabled the whole system from being able to be effective for whatever reason. So the whole systems design is a really good way of looking at our design, not just from what we're asked to do, but the whole picture around the business purpose of what we're doing. And I could say a day in the life is the best way to begin your whole systems design. Whatever system you're building, let's say I'm building a system to help nurses manage patients. You should spend a day in the hospital next to a nurse and see what it is that they do, because you'll find they don't sit down and use a mouse. They stand up and have a very small keyboard that they can work on without a mouse. And you'll say, wow, these guys can't use the type of system I was going to build, was going to have all the right clicks and hovers and things like that, because they just don't have access to that. And that's part of understanding the whole system. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Last I saved is human dynamics, because this is the most fun. Human interaction. It encompasses everything. The skills of managing and influencing people, your interrelationships with others in IT projects or environment. I can say from great experience how important this is. When I was 26 years old and I never really had it, I should say, an ability to interact with people, and I won an award and my head got bigger than life. And I say today, I wish I knew half as much as I thought I knew when I was 26, because I would be a smart person, because I know so little now. But my manager put me into an interrelationship course and communications course. Best thing he could ever do. He basically popped my bubble so I could get my head through the doorway, and then he said, you need to learn how to interact with people. And he put me in a course. Best investment I ever had in my career. So if I take a look, the attributes are on the left that we look at for human dynamics and doing a CITA-P review, for instance. But what does it really mean? What does managing the culture mean? Any ideas? I'm going to throw it out there for you. Politics. Let's be honest. Managing the culture is politics. It doesn't mean you need to play politics well. It means you need to understand the impact of politics in the human culture and how it's going to help you in executing as a change agent. Like I said, I try to avoid politics at all costs. Bill Guest, my CEO of Metrics Reporting, said, love everybody, just some people from a greater distance. And I believe that's a very good philosophy. Politics, it's fun to look at people that are engaged in it, but I think it's best as an architect to stay out of it as best you can. You're pulled into it at times. You have to be very careful not to get caught up in it. Customer relations, understanding the physiological dynamics and managing stakeholder and consumer expectations. There's a book called Groundswell that talks about managing multiple stakeholders, and they call it scenario design. The idea is that if I'm building a web page for somebody that wants to support it with ads, I have multiple stakeholders. I've got the people that are building the web page trying to do something. I've got the people that want their ads to take up the whole screen, and I got the consumers who don't want to see any ads at all. So I got three people in contention with each other. And customer relations and understanding these dynamics is a part of the human dynamics system of understanding how to make it all happen. And often, to help the major stakeholder, you need to focus on one of the two minor stakeholders. Leadership and management. This is a big deal at Iasa. I can't say how much at Iasa we really look at leadership not being the leader of a group or a chapter. It is. That's a big, big deal because there's so much responsibility with it. But what you do as that leader and mentoring people, that's a big deal for Iasa. If you take a look at all of the professions that are out there, there's an element of what I would say apprenticeship that comes with the role. Doctors go into the apprenticeship program at a hospital in a residency manner. Plumbers have, I think, a multi-year apprenticeship. I have a friend who's a plumber that's been, I think it took him 6 years to get his plumbing certificate. Apprenticeship is what architects need, and they need people to mentor them. And us as architects need to mentor those that are coming up in the ranks. The question I usually ask people is, who's going to replace you and what are you doing to help them? Because you probably don't want to be stuck doing the same thing you're doing year after year. You want to move up and do something a little bit greater. Peer interaction is, if you know anything about architects, they all have opinions. And playing well with other architects is a little more difficult sometimes because we all have our various quirks. And it's very imperative that a solution architect and an infrastructure architect play very well together for the success of the solution. And it can't be an us and them. Infrastructure guys say no because they've been thrown things over the fence that don't work or need to run as administrator. Solution architects need to say, I need you to help me set up my development environment because I need to know the constraints that I'm working under. So I don't throw something over that you can't deploy. It's very important. Our collaboration and negotiation, it gets into more politics. And the thing is, trade-offs aren't always the answer. You've got a situation sometimes as an architect where you have to allow others to fail. And then you have to have a recovery mechanism for it. Trade-offs sometimes create what I'm going to say the best that mediocrity has to offer. So you need to know when to do a trade-off. I give, you give, we're all on the same page, we get along, versus saying, okay, we're going to go your way. But as soon as it fails on us, we have to have a recovery plan. So we have a risk, we mitigate the risk, we have a contingency. And that's a way of looking at that. Presentation skills, understanding your audience and presenting and communicating to them appropriately. My business partner, Andy Catlin, taught you have to listen to your audience until your ears bleed. And the disadvantage of doing a webinar, I can't tell if Johan and Tom have fallen asleep yet or if their eyes are glazed over because they're bored. And even when I am presenting in a live situation, I can't see that either. So often what I say in presentation as an architect, have another architect watching the audience while you present your ideas. And as soon as you make a loss of connection, have that person intervene. It's just a way, let's be honest, it's all about getting the customer's value realized. A customer being ourselves, right, if we're working within our own corporation. If you want that to be the goal, you need to know when you're missing that goal, and you need to know, to have the intervention take place. Our writing skills, quality over quantity. It was Mark Twain who paraphrased, believe it or not, Plato when he said, I would have written a short letter, but I didn't have time, so I wrote a long one instead. I think what's interesting about that is it takes a lot of effort to keep things concise. But if you can do that, people will read a 1 or 2 page architecture, but they won't read a 26-page architecture. And so you really want them to understand what you're trying to do. You want to keep it down and concise. I have proposals that I've written that were 1-pagers. It was a metrics reporting policy. Every proposal, whether it's $10,000 or $10 million, fits on 1 page. And our philosophy was if you can't write it in a way to make it fit on 1 page, you don't know it well enough to be doing it. And I don't propose that on everybody, but if you think about that, that's an interesting philosophy. So that gets into quality of writing. The Platinum Rule. This is an interesting book. There are a lot of books like this out there. Basic theme of this is do unto others as they'd like done unto them. The Golden Rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The Platinum Rule is like they want done unto them. And it's by better understanding their personality types. The book breaks it into 4 basic behaviors, which breaks into 4 more per behavior, so there's 16 total, so that you can adapt your communication to your audience appropriately. Understanding your audience and what they're receptive to is really a big hurdle for architects because it's so easy for us to get off into the technology of what we're doing and bring them to our level when we really should be brought our concepts to their level of understanding. And if their level of understanding is business, we need to understand how to communicate in terms of business. So that's part of that. So that kind of gets us through the 5 pillars. So the next question is, are you an architect? So Johan and Tom, are you an architect? And I might have lost them.
I hope to be one.
You hope to be one. Okay. Well, let me ask this question. Do you care? And don't answer it because that's a loaded question on purpose. The reality is you do care. You want to know why? If you take CNN Money survey from 2010, software architect was the #1 job. It was rated #1. Who did it compete against? Well, information technologists, psychiatrists, sales executives, primary care physicians are at 34. Yeah, guess what? We do care. And as a software architect, I have to say, it is a great position to be in. I absolutely love it. And if you think it's for you, whatever pursuit you have to do to get there, go for it. You're going to be a better person regardless if you ever achieve it or not. But the question is, how do I do it? Well, you got to be ready. And the Buddhist proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, is very true. There are many people at Iasa that want to help you become an architect. But you're not going to be able to go through the rigor unless you're wanting to be an architect, and that's when your teachers will appear. So your call to action, and I think everybody on the call is an architect, whether you think you are or not. The fact that you're going through what these 5 pillars are, you're going to find that you probably rate higher than you realize. So the thing to do is to download our Iasa Skills Matrix, and there's a link in the deck that will get you there. The Skills Matrix will give you a way of rating yourself against the 5 pillars. And basically, I think this is an old version. I'll have to update the slide. We basically have a 4-number system now. 1 is foundation, 2 is associate, 3 would be professional, 4 would be master. So I do need to update the slide. But you can rate yourself against the 5 pillars and the breakdowns of the 5 pillars to see your as-is state. Okay? Now, based on that, you can say, do I need to improve? Let's say I come out mostly as an associate architect. Okay? Do I need to improve? Maybe I should change this. Do I want to improve? Okay? If I don't need to improve, then guess what? Go get certified. If you're already a practicing architect, you know, don't bang your head against the wall. Just go ahead and get certified. The Iasa Foundation is a exam based on a written test. The CITA-P is an interaction with a board. I can't say enough that the experience you'll walk away with from a CITA-P exam is going to be that a person that went after that doctoral probably experienced. It's a great way to meet in front of 4 peers that probably know collectively twice as much as you do, but they generally are interested in seeing you get certified as an architect. And it's one of the few times on the planet you'll ever have an audience that really, truly understands everything you're saying. So from that experience alone, it's worth going after CITA-P. And then if you get the certification, great. Let's say that you do want to improve, you're not ready for the exam yet. You know what? There's some stuff out on the site that Miha Kroll put together, Architecture Foundation in 30 days. It's a self-study. These are links and materials that you can use to get up to speed on what these 5 pillars are and how to do it. He's got it over a 4-week process. The other side is the Iasa Architect Core Class, Transformational Experience. If you go into an Architect Core class, I don't know if either of you have been to it, generally by Wednesday you start saying, ooh, I think this is going to change me. And then by Friday it has changed you. And it really is a neat experience. I love teaching the class because to see the students that go through the class come through with a huge change in their way of thinking is just amazing. It's made extremely, very, very real world, by the way. It's amazing. When Paul and Andy put this together, it was just brilliant the way they did that. To learn more, I've got all of the links to the things that I referenced in the talk at the end here. And basically, there's all kinds of material on the Iasa site as well. So I just want to leave, if you will, with the idea that it really is a growing experience, and any architect inside Iasa will tell you that today I have so much more to learn than I thought I knew yesterday. And I like that. There's a humility about it that I really like about the group and the community. And we all have our opinions, but we also all know that we don't know everything, and we have a lot of blind spots to overcome. With that, I'll leave it to any kind of discussion or questions you might have regarding the 5 pillars, the certification process, the education process, how do I invest in myself, kinds of things, whatever you've got. If you want to know a little bit about running marathons, I can help with that too.
I've been more vocal. I was waiting for Johan to jump in.
I switched computer to a machine that has a microphone now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. So the question on the table is, Johanna, how aligned are you with what the 5 pillars are? Do they make? I'm not saying you personally to evaluate yourself. Do the 5 pillars make what I'm going to say architectural sense?
There is some weaknesses, some parts that are stronger, probably like everyone else.
Absolutely, and that's a really valid answer, because for me, it was always about design. You know, most of my awards that I've received over the years are for my designs and protocols invented and things like that. And I didn't put as much weight in BTS. And then when I learned BTS, I realized that had more impact on my career than anything I'd ever done before. But I have a degree in physics. As a physicist, I could not see the value. And so I think one of the lessons I learned about the Iasa pillar system is that if I really want to focus on something, I need to pick the pillar I'm weakest in, or that I think is least significant in my career. And I need to dive into that first. And the reason I say that is perfecting what you already know is okay. But going after something that you realize you're weak in is even more rewarding. I don't learn by doing things right. I learn by making mistakes. So I always go after what I'm weakest at and focus on that. I don't know if that is applicable to your experiences or not.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, my primary motivation in joining Iasa and becoming involved in this is that I was looking for more formalism around the types of things that I'm already doing, and so I'm hopeful that some of that will come through. I am familiar with the Open Group and TOGAF and all that. That's a difficult thing to really get hold of and make use of. And so to become a member there is harder than, for example, getting involved in ISA.
TOGAF is got the rigor behind what I'm going to say a very extensible enterprise architect framework. And it has very good guidance. I've not taken the ITARP certification. Several colleagues of mine that have CITA-P and MCA have, and they say it's a very good, rigorous certification. And are you TOGAF certified?
No, I'm not. I think though that I would probably like to become TOGAF certified. But as I looked into, well, one of the formal organizations that I can become involved in this area of system architecture.
Right. Yes, exactly. I like that.
This looks like it. I mean, ISA looked like it was more approachable.
ISA is really working on you, the architect, the individual,
right,
and how you execute. I mean, really, if you look at the passion behind what we're trying to do, it's to make you successful in your architectures. And the frameworks are great. They're great tools, and we support them all. But we focus is on you, the architect, making you effective, and that's why the 5 pillars are what they are, and not about the frameworks. We could have made it about the best SDLC on the planet, right? Or we could have made it about the best pattern system on the planet, but we don't. We recognize that they're out there, and there are those that are going to be better than others for certain circumstances and situations and people, and we think they need to be used, but we're not prescriptive to tell you which one to use. But we are prescriptive to say you need to invest in you, first and foremost.
Right. Not only that, I mean, you know, we've been around long enough to know that SDLCs come and go, and to some extent they depend on what is viable depends on the kinds of systems we're building and the kinds of tools we have to build them with. Whereas the value I see with the ISA approach is they're at a more fundamental basis of what does it take to become successful, independent of the tool set, the approach that you take to building systems and that sort of thing. What are the fundamental skills that you need to bring to bear? And I think that's valuable.
You captured then the essence of what we really want to portray ISA to be, and that is a premier international organization that focuses on architectural execution. And I think that's great that you caught that. And we're gonna make mistakes at times. You know, we're gonna stumble over our own toes at times. But most of the people in the leadership roles at ISA have been around for 20 to 30 years, and Paul started this 10 years ago at the very onset of all of these things starting. So it's really a matter of what I would say a maturity, and I think ISA at 10 years is approaching the maturity where I'm going to say the impact that it can have worldwide is being recognized more and more over the last 3 years than it was the previous 7, especially because it was the last 3 years that we realized architecture really does matter. So cool. Well, any other questions, you can get in contact with us at ISA, and you can also, I put my email on the front slide. You can email me if you've got questions and things like that. There is a mentor program that ISA has if you need to get a mentor or have someone in your department or group or whatever that you'd like to get mentored for architecture. And it is a lot of voluntary activity, and the people that are volunteering are very, very passionate about the profession. So you're going to find some of the most dedicated minds to interact with, which is one of the reasons I like it.
Jim, thank you very much. This has been very good, a great introduction. When you were off on your break at the beginning, I mentioned that I am signed up for the week-long basic training in Austin in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to that. There are several questions that I sort of have that I hope to get answered along the way. Not least of them is the proper, most appropriate role of architecture in the world of Agile, whichever of the Agile SDLCs you might be using, and that's an interesting problem.
And
we value working software over over thorough documentation. Well, is thorough documentation, does that include whiteboard discussions? Is that what, at what point do you stop doing any kind of design?
Yeah, and that's extreme too, what you're talking about in pair programming.
Yep.
Agile in the form of Scrum is going to give the documentation rigor that Agile just done on its own doesn't have necessarily. One of the person in charge of the chapter in Sweden, Nicholas Hedin, built his entire company around Agile, and I would definitely, I think he's writing a book on it. I asked him to write a book on it. I hope he writes a book on it. He even designed his building around the Agile concept. He's very successful with it, but getting in touch with him would be a great thing. The other side of the equation is one methodology is going to work well for one type of situation, but it may fail. My personal experience, I was building something called Innovation Works, and I was using the Agile methodology for a government project, and the stakeholders were changing every month. The major stakeholders rotated and became someone new every month. Well, I did it as a fixed bid project, okay? Fixed bid, government, changing stakeholders, screams waterfall if it screams anything. I didn't know it then, but I know it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I had to start paying for each iteration. They would not give me the money for each iteration because the stakeholder would say, that was the guy before me that made that agreement with you. I'm not making that agreement with you.
Wow.
So circumstances can often dictate. So what I would say is one-trick ponies don't exist, but knowing multiple tricks, that helps.
Yep, and sometimes you have to combine them too, I found out, on some projects.
Yes, yes you do. Or you shift from one to another.
Yep.
So I might start as a waterfall, but I might make it agile as I get into implementation and start delivering features.
Yep.
Great addition there, Johan. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I kept you guys late. I appreciate you taking your time out this evening to do this. This is really great and accommodating my time zone. This is great.
Is this slide going to be available for us?